The emergency beacon screamed across the void of space, a desperate cry for help that reached the Galactic Council 3 days after the luminous path went down. Ambassador Kelth had been on a routine survey mission, cataloging primitive worlds in the Outer Rim when his ship's engines failed. The vessel tore through the atmosphere of the third planet in an unremarkable yellow star system, leaving a burning trail across the sky before it crashed into a forested region. Kel remembered the impact. The screaming of metal, the acrid smell of burning circuits. He remembered his crew scattered across the wreckage, some injured, some unconscious. His communications officer lay trapped under a collapsed bulkhead, her breathing shallow and weak. They were stranded on an unknown world, with no way to call for help beyond the automated beacon. Standard protocol said they should secure the crash site, establish a defensive perimeter, and wait for rescue. But then the natives came. Kelth had studied first contact scenarios for 30 years. He knew what to expect from primitive species when confronted with something beyond their understanding. They would either attack out of fear and territorial instinct, or they would flee and observe from a distance. Those were the only 2 responses the Galactic Council had ever documented. Fear and aggression were universal constants across all known intelligent life. The humans did neither. The first one appeared at the edge of the crash site within an hour. It was a male specimen, wearing primitive cloth coverings and carrying a wooden stick. Kelth had ordered his remaining crew to stay hidden, to observe, but not engage. The human approached slowly, calling out in its native language. The sounds meant nothing to Kelth, but the tone was cautious, not aggressive. Then the human saw Kelth's communications officer trapped in the wreckage. Without hesitation, the human rushed forward. Kelth raised his emergency weapon, ready to defend his crew member, but the human ignored him entirely. It began pulling at the metal debris with its bare hands, calling out again in that strange language. More humans appeared, responding to the calls. They brought tools, primitive but effective, and worked together to lift the bulkhead. Kelth watched in stunned silence as these beings freed his officer and carried her gently to a cleared area. One of the humans, an older female, examined the injuries with careful hands. She produced a cloth bag filled with various items and began treating the wounds. The movements were practiced, efficient. These beings had medical knowledge, limited as it was. More humans arrived throughout that first day. They brought water in containers, food wrapped in cloth, and materials to build shelter. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, asking for nothing in return. Kelth's translator began picking up patterns in their language. Words like help and safe and hospital started to make sense. By nightfall, all of Kelth's crew had been found and gathered in one location. The humans had constructed temporary shelters and started a fire for warmth. They offered food, simple but nourishing. One human, a young male, stayed awake through the night, tending the fire and watching over the injured. Kelth sent his first report to the council the next morning, when he managed to repair the emergency communicator. He chose his words carefully, aware of how impossible they would sound. He described the crash, the injuries, and then the human response. He noted their physical characteristics: binocular vision, forward-facing eyes like predators, omnivorous teeth suggesting a hunting background, strong throwing arms and endurance physiology consistent with persistence hunting. These were apex predators on their world, no question about it. And yet they were helping complete strangers at significant cost to themselves. The humans had spent hours of labor on the rescue. They had shared food and resources. They had given medical care and comfort. The young male who watched through the night had clearly sacrificed sleep for their safety. None of this made sense from an evolutionary perspective. The behavior pattern is unprecedented, Kelth recorded. These beings exhibit altruistic tendencies that cannot be explained by kin selection or reciprocal advantage. They are expending valuable resources on unknown entities with no guarantee of return. This is strategically irrational. This is biologically alarming. The Council's response came within hours. They wanted more data. They wanted psychological profiles. They wanted to understand what would drive a predator species to behave this way. Kelth spent 3 more days with the humans while waiting for rescue. The settlement they had crashed near was small, perhaps 200 individuals. The humans called it a town and the planet Earth. They were not wealthy by any measure. Their technology was centuries behind galactic standard. They had no space travel, no advanced medicine, no energy weapons. They struggled to grow enough food for themselves, but every day they came to check on the alien crew. They brought what little they could spare. They smiled and used gentle gestures. Some brought their young offspring to see the visitors, teaching them to be unafraid. The children stared with wide eyes full of curiosity, not fear. On the final day before the rescue ship arrived, Kelth sat with the older female who had first treated his communications officer. She spoke to him in halting words that his translator could now interpret. She asked if his crew member would be all right. She asked if they had far to travel home. She asked if they needed anything else before they left. Kelth asked her why. Why help strangers who might be dangerous? Why share food when they had so little? Why risk everything for beings they didn't know? The woman smiled, her face wrinkling in a way that somehow conveyed warmth. She said something that the translator rendered as, "Because it's the right thing to do. Because we would hope someone would do the same for us. Because kindness costs us nothing compared to what cruelty costs the world." When the Council's rescue ship arrived and pulled the Luminous Path crew to safety, Kelth sent his final report. He included all the data, all the observations, all the psychological profiles he could compile. At the end, he added a personal note. "I have studied hundreds of species across dozens of worlds. I have never encountered anything like this. These humans are kind by nature, generous by choice, and compassionate by instinct. I cannot explain it. I can only report it. And I must add this warning. A species this kind, this willing to help others at cost to themselves, surviving on a world this harsh, must possess capabilities we have not yet seen. They are either the most foolish species in the galaxy or the most dangerous. I fear it is the latter." The Galactic Council read his report in silence. Then they convened an emergency session to discuss what should be done about Earth and its humans. The Meridian entered Earth's solar system 6 weeks after Kelth's report reached the Galactic Council. War Scholar Threx stood on the bridge, reviewing the data from the Luminous Path incident for the 100th time. He had been chosen to lead this mission because of his experience with integration protocols. 7 species had joined the Council under his guidance. He understood alien psychology better than most, but humans confused him. The Council had designed the Meridian to look like a peaceful research vessel, but it carried enough firepower to level a continent. Threx didn't expect to need it. Most primitive species either welcomed contact with open arms, hoping for technology and trade, or they reacted with fear and hostility. Either way, the response was predictable. Humans, according to Kelth's report, were not predictable. "Begin the observation protocols," Threx ordered. "I want controlled scenarios across multiple population centers. Different cultures, different geographic regions. Let's see if this kindness is universal or just a local phenomenon." The ship's xenopsychologist, Dr. Vin, had prepared a series of tests. They were simple, elegant, and had been used successfully on dozens of worlds. The crew would send down disguised drones that appeared to be lost human children. They would simulate medical emergencies. They would pose as travelers needing help. Standard integration testing to measure empathy, cooperation, and resource-sharing behavior. The first test took place in a large human city they called New York. A drone disguised as a small human child was programmed to appear lost and distressed in a crowded area. Threx watched the monitors, waiting to see how long it would take before someone stopped to help. On most worlds, the average was 11 minutes. Many species simply walked past, unwilling to involve themselves in unknown situations. The first human stopped in 12 seconds. A female in business attire knelt down, speaking softly to the child drone. Within a minute, she had called others for help. Within 5 minutes, uniformed humans designated as police officers had arrived. The child drone was taken to a safe location, given food and water, and treated with gentle care. Every human involved in the chain of events had stopped their own activities to help. Threx ordered the test repeated in different locations: Tokyo, Cairo, Buenos Aires, London, Lagos, Mumbai. The results were consistent. Humans helped. They helped quickly, willingly, and often went beyond minimal assistance. "It's not cultural," Dr. Vin reported after the first week. "Every human civilization we've tested, despite developing independently for thousands of years, shows the same behavior pattern. The response time varies slightly, the methods differ, but the underlying tendency is universal. They help strangers." Threx moved to the next phase. They staged medical emergencies using holographic projections. An elderly human collapsing on a street. A person having a seizure in a public space. Someone injured in a fall. In every case, multiple humans rushed to help. They called emergency services. They provided first aid. They stayed with the victim until professional help arrived. Many refused to leave even then, wanting to ensure the person would be all right. The crew expanded the tests. They placed drones disguised as homeless humans in various locations, programmed to ask for food. The results shocked even Threx. While not every human helped, a significant percentage did. They gave money, food, clothing. Some stopped to talk, to ask if there was anything else needed. A few brought the drone beggars to shelters or offered information about assistance programs. "This makes no evolutionary sense," Dr. Vin said during the evening briefing. "Resource-sharing behavior should be limited to kin groups or reciprocal relationships. Helping genetic strangers at cost to oneself reduces fitness. Yet humans do it constantly." Threx had Dr. Vin dig deeper. They accessed human information networks, what the humans called the Internet. The data available was staggering. Humans documented everything about themselves, seemingly without concern for security. What they found disturbed them more than the kindness itself. Every human culture had stories, myths, and legends that celebrated self-sacrifice. Heroes who died protecting others. Saints who gave everything to help the poor. Warriors who showed mercy to defeated enemies. The narratives were consistent across continents and centuries. Humans valued compassion, empathy, and kindness above almost all other traits. Their religions, diverse as they were, shared common themes. Love your neighbor. Help those in need. Treat others as you would be treated. The details varied, but the core message remained the same. Be kind. Dr. Vin presented her findings to Threx in his private quarters. "It's biological," she said quietly. "Their brains are wired for empathy at a fundamental level. They have specialized neurons dedicated to understanding and sharing the feelings of others. When they see someone in pain, their own pain centers activate. When they see someone happy, they feel happiness. They can't help it. Then they're weak," Threx said. "Easily manipulated. We've seen species like this before. They make excellent servants." Dr. Vin shook her head. "That's what I thought at first. But look at their planet, War Scholar. Look at their history." She brought up images of Earth. It was a beautiful world, but also dangerous. Predators roamed the land. Diseases spread rapidly. Natural disasters struck without warning. The climate ranged from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. It was not a gentle world. And yet humans thrived. They had spread to every continent, every climate zone. They dominated their planet completely, despite being relatively weak individually. No natural armor. No claws or fangs. No venom. They were soft, fragile things compared to most apex predators. They succeeded because of cooperation, Dr. Vin explained. Because they could work together in large groups with unrelated individuals. Because they could trust strangers enough to build cities and nations. Their kindness isn't weakness. It's their greatest strength. It's what made them dominant on their world. Thrax considered this. But that means... Yes, Dr. Vin interrupted. It means their kindness gave them an evolutionary advantage. It means they became apex predators, not despite their compassion, but because of it. And War Scholar, if kindness is what made them successful on a death world like Earth, against all the predators and disasters and diseases they faced, then we need to ask ourselves a very important question. What question? Dr. Vin's expression was grim. What are they capable of when they're not being kind? Because War Scholar, nothing in evolution is free. If compassion gave them an advantage, it's because they were already dangerous enough that cooperation made them unstoppable. We're looking at a species that chose kindness as their default setting. That means they have other settings. And I suspect those other settings are absolutely terrifying. Thrax sat in silence, the weight of the implications settling over him. He had seen war. He had witnessed the violence of desperate species fighting for survival. He understood the mathematics of conflict. And he suddenly realized what Dr. Vin was saying. Humans were kind because they could afford to be. Because they were secure enough in their own power that they could spare energy for compassion. Because they had already won the war for survival on their world, so completely that they could focus on being better to each other. Access their historical databases, Thrax ordered. I want to know what humans do when kindness isn't enough. I want to know what happens when they stop being nice. Dr. Vin's face paled. Are you sure, War Scholar? Some things, once seen, cannot be forgotten. I need to know what we're dealing with, Thrax said. Access the files. Dr. Vin entered the commands. The screen filled with data. Historical records. War documents. Testimonies and images. Thrax began to read, and with each passing minute, his certainty grew. The Galactic Council needed to see this. They needed to understand. Humans weren't just kind. They were kind despite being capable of unimaginable violence. And that made them the most dangerous species Thrax had ever encountered. Thrax spent 3 days reviewing human history, and by the end, he understood why kindness was rare in the galaxy. It was rare because most species couldn't afford it. Compassion was a luxury for the secure, the powerful, the victorious. Humans had earned the right to be kind through 10,000 years of horror. The records were comprehensive, and humans seemed almost proud to document their own darkness. They recorded their wars in detail, preserving every battle, every strategy, every casualty count. The numbers were staggering. The 2 conflicts they called World Wars had killed over 70 million humans. 70 million of their own species, dead in the span of 3 decades. Thrax had seen wars of extermination before, species fighting to the last member for survival. But human wars weren't about survival. They were about ideas, about territory, about resources that weren't even scarce. What disturbed Thrax most wasn't the scale of the violence. It was the efficiency. Humans had developed industrial killing. They built factories specifically designed to murder other humans in bulk. They created weapons that could vaporize entire cities in seconds. They engineered diseases to use as weapons. They developed chemical agents that caused agonizing death. They designed bombs that scattered smaller bombs to maximize casualties, and they used all of it. On themselves, Dr. Vin compiled a presentation for the crew. She showed them footage from human conflicts. Trenches filled with bodies. Cities reduced to ash. Concentration camps where humans systematically murdered millions of other humans. Atomic bombs that turned populated areas into radioactive wastelands. These are the same species that stopped to help our lost child drones, she said quietly. The same species that shares food with homeless strangers. The same species that has Doctors Without Borders who travel to dangerous areas just to help people they've never met. The crew watched in silence as the images continued. But it wasn't just the violence that disturbed them. It was the pattern underneath. Notice what happens after each conflict, Dr. Vin continued. She showed images of humans helping former enemies. Americans rebuilding Japan after dropping atomic bombs on them. Germans and French becoming allies after centuries of warfare. Humans sending aid to places they had recently fought against. They forgive, she said. They show mercy even to enemies who showed them none. They help rebuild what they destroyed. They treat the wounded on both sides. But War Scholar, this forgiveness has limits. She brought up records of resistance movements. Humans fighting against occupation, against tyranny, against oppression. She showed them the underground railroads where humans risked death to help escape slaves. The networks that hid refugees from genocide. The partisans who fought against overwhelming odds. When humans decide something is unforgivable, when they collectively agree that a line has been crossed, they don't just fight back. They mobilize completely. They sacrifice themselves in waves. They never stop coming. And War Scholar, they remember. Threx watched footage of human soldiers landing on beaches under heavy fire, dying by thousands to establish a foothold. He saw humans flying planes into enemy ships deliberately, choosing death to damage their opponents. He saw resistance fighters continuing to fight even when capture meant torture and execution. The kindness is real, Dr. Vin said. But it exists alongside this. They're not kind because they're weak or naive. They're kind because they choose to be fully aware of what they're capable of when they choose otherwise. The ship's tactical AI had been running analyses throughout the presentation. It displayed its conclusions on the main screen. Threat assessment revision required. Initial classification, level 3, primitive but adaptable. Recommended classification, level 9, extreme caution advised. This species demonstrates unprecedented capacity for organized violence, combined with high pain tolerance and willingness to accept casualties. Standard deterrent protocols unlikely to be effective. Threx dismissed the crew and sat alone in the observation deck. Looking down at Earth, it was a beautiful planet, blue and green and white, peaceful from orbit. He thought about the humans down there going about their daily lives, helping each other, being kind to strangers, raising their children to value compassion. And he thought about what would happen if someone threatened all of that. He drafted his report to the Galactic Council carefully. He included all the data, all the observations, all the historical analysis. He described the two sides of humanity, the compassionate caregivers and the efficient killers. He explained that these weren't different groups, but the same beings choosing different responses based on context. At the end of the report, he added his professional assessment. Humans represent a unique challenge to integration protocols. They are simultaneously the most altruistic and most violent species we have encountered. Their kindness appears genuine and culturally reinforced across all populations. However, this kindness exists in parallel with a demonstrated capacity for total war. They show mercy freely, but withdraw it completely when certain boundaries are violated. Recommend approaching first contact with extreme care. These beings will be valuable allies, but catastrophic enemies. They must be offered genuine partnership, not subordination. They will detect dishonesty or manipulation, and their response will be decisive. He hesitated before adding the final paragraph. This officer recommends full council membership upon first contact, with no probationary period and no restrictions. The risk of treating them as inferiors far outweighs any concern about their technological level. They will catch up quickly. They always have. Better to have them as partners now than enemies later. They are kind by choice. Let us not be the ones who make them choose differently. Thrax sent the report and waited for the council's response. It came within a day, and his heart sank as he read it. The council had decided to proceed with standard integration protocols. They would offer humanity probationary membership with restricted rights and limited access to galactic technology. They would demonstrate superiority through a show of force if necessary. They would follow the same procedures that had worked for 37 other species. Thrax read the orders and knew immediately that the council was making a mistake. They were treating humans like every other primitive species. They weren't understanding the central truth that his research had revealed. Humans had kindness, yes, but that kindness wasn't weakness or ignorance. It was a deliberate choice made by beings who knew exactly what the alternative looked like. It was a hard-won peace maintained by people who understood war intimately. It was mercy offered by those who were fully capable of vengeance. The council was about to poke a sleeping predator and assume. Its closed eyes meant weakness. Thrax began preparing the Meridian for first contact. He ordered his crew to review all combat protocols and ensure all weapon systems were ready. Not because he wanted to fight, but because he suspected that before this was over, someone would. And when humans fought, they didn't do it halfway. He looked down at Earth one more time, at the billions of humans going about their lives, being kind to each other, helping strangers, showing compassion. He hoped desperately that the council's plan would work, that humans would accept the terms offered, that this would end peacefully. But in his hearts, he knew better. He had seen their history. He understood their nature. Humans were kind for a reason. They were kind because they had seen the alternative and chosen to be better. But that choice was theirs to make and theirs to unmake. The council was about to test humanity's kindness. And Thrax feared what they would discover when that kindness ran out. The Galactic Council made first contact on a Tuesday morning. They chose the United Nations building in New York, broadcasting their arrival to every screen on Earth simultaneously. 12 massive ships descended through the clouds, their hulls gleaming with advanced technology that made human spacecraft look like children's toys. Thrax watched from the Meridian as the council's spokesperson, High Chancellor Varan, delivered the prepared statement. It was the same speech given to dozens of species before, translated carefully into multiple human languages. People of Earth, we come in peace. We represent the Galactic Council, an organization of 47 civilized species. We offer you the chance to join us, to access technology and knowledge beyond your current understanding. In exchange, you will accept probationary status for 50 Earth years, during which your rights and privileges will be limited as you prove yourselves worthy of full membership. You have 1 week to decide. Thrax waited for the human response. Most species immediately accepted, grateful for the opportunity. A few tried to negotiate, but ultimately agreed when shown the technological gap. Only 3 species in recorded history had refused outright, and they had been isolated until they reconsidered. The human response came 6 hours later. A single woman walked to the podium at the UN building, her hair gray, her face calm. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chun, and she was a diplomat, a scientist, and a grandmother. The council had chosen her as their primary contact because her psychological profile suggested reasonableness and rationality. "We thank the Galactic Council for their offer," Dr. Chun said, her voice steady. "We appreciate the opportunity to join the larger galactic community. However, we must respectfully decline the terms as presented. We will not accept second-class status in any system, no matter how advanced that system may be. We are willing to engage with the Council as equals, or to wait until you are ready to treat us that way. Until then, we will continue on our own path." The silence in the Council chamber was absolute. Threx closed his eyes, knowing what would come next. High Chancellor Varan's response was swift and predictable. "You misunderstand your position. This is not a negotiation. Accept our terms or face economic and technological isolation. We control access to faster-than-light travel, advanced medicine, and resources beyond your system. Without us, you will remain trapped on your single planet, limited and alone." Dr. Chun smiled, and something in that smile made Threx's blood run cold. "High Chancellor, we've been trapped on this single planet for our entire existence. We've built civilizations, created art, developed science, and learned to care for each other, all without your help. We can continue to do so. But let me be clear, we desire friendship, not subordination. We hope you'll reconsider your terms." The Council voted that evening. 32 members voted to enforce compliance through military intimidation. They would send a fleet to Earth orbit and demonstrate overwhelming force. 15 members abstained. Only Threx voted against the measure. "You're making a mistake," he told the Council. "These beings are not like others you've encountered. They're primitives with chemical rockets," Chancellor Varan replied. "They'll comply when they see our power." 12 warships entered Earth orbit 3 days later. They were Council military vessels, each capable of destroying a city with a single shot. They positioned themselves over major population centers: New York, Beijing, London, Moscow, Tokyo, Delhi. The message was clear: comply or face consequences. The human response shocked the galaxy. Within 24 hours, every nation on Earth issued a joint statement. Governments that had been enemies for decades stood together. Countries with centuries of conflict united under a single banner. The statement was simple: we refuse. If you want our surrender, you'll have to take it. But it wasn't the words that disturbed the Council. It was what happened next. Human industrial capacity, previously dedicated to commerce and consumer goods, shifted overnight. Factories that made cars began producing military vehicles. Chemical plants started manufacturing explosives. Research facilities shared their findings openly, abandoning patents and secrecy. The entire human species mobilized as one. Threx watched the satellite feeds in horror. Humans weren't panicking. They weren't rioting or fleeing. They were organizing. Militia groups trained in every city. Governments stockpiled supplies. Engineers worked around the clock on defensive systems. Scientists collaborated across borders on projects that made Threx's tactical AI flag multiple warnings. "They're weaponizing everything," Dr. Vin reported. "Their space stations, their satellites, their industrial infrastructure. War Scholar, they're turning their entire planet into a fortress." Dr. Chun sent another message to the Council on the 5th day. "We don't want war. We would still prefer to be friends. But if you believe you can take our freedom because we were kind to you, then you fundamentally misunderstand humanity. We are kind because we are strong enough to choose it. We are kind because we built civilizations that value it. But we are not only kind." She paused, and her expression hardened. "You came to our planet with a crashed ship, and we saved you. We gave you shelter and food and medicine. We gave you shelter and food and medicine. We showed you kindness because that's who we choose to be. Now you come with weapons to force our compliance, and you're surprised that we resist? You mistake our kindness for weakness, and that might be the last mistake you make. The Council's tactical AI began displaying projections. Human population, 8 billion. Manufacturing capacity, unprecedented for their technological level. Resource availability, significant. Social cohesion, increasing exponentially. Willingness to accept casualties. Historical data suggests extremely high. Likelihood of surrender under pressure, 0%. Recommendation, the AI concluded. Immediate withdrawal and reassessment. This species will resist extinction-level threats with total mobilization. Probability of successful intimidation, 0. Probability of prolonged conflict if engagement proceeds, 97%. Projected Council casualties in full conflict scenario, unacceptable. Chancellor Varan dismissed the AI's warnings. They have no space fleet. They have no energy weapons. They barely have nuclear technology. We'll demonstrate our superiority, and they'll surrender. Threx sent one final desperate message to the Council. They are kind not because they must be, but because they choose to be. Every act of compassion, every moment of mercy, every instance of helping strangers is a deliberate choice made by beings who understand the alternative intimately. They choose kindness while knowing they could choose violence. That makes them the most dangerous species we've ever encountered. Do not test their patience. Do not challenge their dignity. Do not make them choose war. The Council ignored him. 3 hours later, Dr. Chun gave her final address to both Earth and the Galactic Council. You've had your answer, and you've chosen to threaten us anyway. So let me tell you what happens next. We will resist. We will fight with everything we have. We will use every resource, every weapon, every tactic we've developed in 10,000 years of warfare. We will sacrifice whatever is necessary to remain free. But here's what you need to understand, she continued, her voice filled with quiet intensity. We don't want to be your enemies. We want to be your friends. We want to share knowledge and culture and art. We want to explore the galaxy together and learn from each other. We want all of that, desperately. But we want it as equals, not as subjects. She looked directly at the camera, directly at the Council watching from across the stars. So I'm asking you one more time, will you be our friends or will you be our enemies? Because we're ready for either. We would rather have friendship, but we will accept war if that's what you choose for us. The decision is yours. Thrax didn't wait for the Council's response. He sent his own message directly to Chancellor Varan, bypassing protocols. Immediate status upgrade to full membership. No probation. No restrictions. Do it now, before this escalates beyond control. You would have us surrender to primitives? Varan replied. I would have us recognize reality, Threx said. These beings are offering us genuine partnership backed by the willingness to go to total war if refused. They're not bluffing. They're not afraid. They're ready. Give them what they're asking for, or watch the Council get dragged into a conflict that will cost us more than you can imagine. For 3 hours, the Council debated. In that time, more human weapons came online. More defensive systems activated. More humans mobilized. The entire species moved as one, united in their determination to remain free. Finally, the Council voted. Full membership. Equal rights. No probation. Threx delivered the message himself, landing at the UN building personally. Dr. Chen met him at the entrance, her expression unreadable. The Council offers full membership, Threx said. Equal status. Equal rights. Equal voice. We recognize that our initial offer was inadequate. We hope you'll accept this revised proposal. Dr. Chun's face softened into a genuine smile. We're happy to accept. That's all we wanted from the beginning. Welcome to Earth, War Scholar. Let us show you our hospitality. As human and alien delegates shook hands for the first time as equals, as celebrations erupted across Earth, Threx turned to Dr. Chun one last time. You would truly have fought us? He asked quietly. Yes, she said simply. We would have lost, probably. But we would have fought. Because some things are worth any cost. Your kindness, Threx said. It's real. But so is your capacity for violence. Dr. Chun nodded. They're not contradictory, War Scholar. We're kind because we know what the alternative looks like. We choose compassion because we've experienced cruelty. We offer friendship because we understand war. Our kindness is rare because it's hard-won and carefully maintained. Never mistake it for weakness. Threx understood then. The galaxy was about to learn something new. Kindness wasn't the absence of strength. It was strength under control. It was power held in reserve. It was the choice to be gentle made by those who could be anything but. Welcome to the council, he said to Dr. Chun. I think you're going to change everything. She smiled again, warm and genuine. We hope so. Now, shall we discuss how humanity can help with the crisis in the Andromeda sector? I understand there are refugees who need assistance. And with that, humanity joined the galaxy not as conquerors or subjects, but as friends who would stand beside allies, show mercy to enemies, and fight like demons if anyone threatened the right to be kind.